Don't give me a soap opera.
Having some technical difficulties, beyond our control. Yeah, this can be. Try it. Yeah. ABC material.
That's very persuasive.
Judges, the colors that we're objecting to.
Is it going to come on, Mr. Teller, you think?
Yes, sir. Reasonably assured.
All right.
Can you run that thing forward?
No, unfortunately, this can't do that.
The hearing began with a discussion of Theodore Bundy's competency to stand trial. Two experts in criminal psychology agreed that Bundy exhibited a personality disorder, but differed on his ability to continue the proceedings. After listening to testimony, Judge Edward Cowarth ruled.
I find the defendant competent to stand trial, and we're ready to proceed.
The judge also heard Bundy's request for new legal counsel. Bundy argued he has lost confidence in his attorney.
Your Honor, I'm here today because I wish to be acquitted. My counsel telling me that there's no way they can see of achieving that goal for me. Then I say that we have some fundamental problems.
Public Defender Mike Minerva told the judge he has doubts about his effectiveness as Bundy's attorney.
In the situation that we're in now, Your Honor, I could never be sure that my future advocacy in this case would not be tempered to some degree.
But again, Judge Coward denied the motions. Minerva will continue as Bundy's court-appointed attorney. The next matter for the court, the discussion to move the trial to another city. Jack Sinks for ABC News in Tallahassee, Florida.
Ted Bundy entered the courtroom looking more like the lawyer he once aspired to become than the man on trial for murder here today. The 32-year-old University of Washington graduate and former law student is suspected in the murder or disappearance of at least 21 women in 4 states. Those whose bodies have been found were sexually molested and severely beaten. Early last year at this Florida State University sorority house, 5 co-eds were brutally attacked. Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy were found dead. Ted Bundy, who was living at this nearby boarding house, was charged with the murders. In court today, the judge was asked to decide if Ted Bundy is mentally competent to stand trial.
Yes, I do think that he has an excellent grasp of the proceedings, and is intellectually, he certainly is exceedingly well informed.
I find the defendant competent to stand trial and we're ready to proceed.
Then Bundy himself made a motion to dismiss his court-appointed attorney.
It's my position that my counsel, one, believe that I'm guilty. Two, that they have told me they see no way of presenting an effective defense, and in no uncertain terms they have told me that. And three, that they see no way of avoiding conviction.
I'm going to deny the motion to substitute counsel.
Ted Bundy has also asked the court to move the trial to another city. The judge has taken that motion under advisement, but he plans to go ahead with jury selection here tomorrow. Rebecca Chase, ABC News, Tallahassee, Florida.
That's what was there.
Yes, sir. Channel 6 is next. Is that what it is? That was channel 27.
Jury selection will begin tomorrow. KSL TV's John Hollenhorst report.
Since his arrest in Pensacola nearly a year and a half ago, Theodore Bundy has been in and out of court, fighting to head off his trial for the murder of 2 sorority sisters and the brutal assault on 3 other young women. Today, the day scheduled for trial, Bundy unleashed a flurry of motions asking for more delays. He wants the trial moved to another city because of the intense publicity surrounding the case. The murders of Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman shocked the city of Tallahassee and drew a swarm of reporters from all over Florida. But the televised court proceedings are also being watched carefully by reporters from western states. Bundy is suspected of committing more than a dozen sex murders in Utah, Washington, and Colorado. Press credentials have been issued to about 300 journalists representing dozens of news organizations. In his effort to delay the trial, Bundy asked for new lawyers, saying he no longer has confidence in his public defenders.
It's my position that my counsel, one, believe that I'm guilty. Two, that they have told me they see no way of presenting an effective defense, and in no uncertain terms they have told me that. Your Honor, I'm here today because I wish to be acquitted, because I assert my innocence.
But the prosecution argued that if Bundy is given new lawyers, it would delay the trial for months.
This crime occurred 18 months, getting on there 18 months ago, and there hadn't been a single delay since indictment, except for Bundy's making a delay in this case.
Despite Bundy's complaints, Judge Edward Cowart said he believes the public defenders are competent lawyers. He ordered them to stay on the case. 2 psychiatrists testified that Bundy is mentally competent to stand trial, even though they say he has a serious mental illness.
I think he is likely to engage in behavior, in my opinion, that would be harmful to others, and then secondarily likely to be harmful to him.
The psychiatrists agreed that Bundy is rational, and they say the former law student is capable of participating in his own defense. Judge Cowart finally turned down all of Bundy's efforts to delay the trial. Jury selection will begin tomorrow morning. John Hollenhorst for CBS News, Tallahassee, Florida. John Hollenhorst, Eyewitness News, Tallahassee, Florida.
The next 2 will be the Channel 6. All right, thank you.
The hearing started with testimony of 2 psychiatrists regarding Bundy's competency to stand trial. Prosecution witness Herbie Fleckley examined Bundy last Thursday, read previous psychiatric reports from Utah, plus descriptions and autopsy reports of this case before coming to a conclusion.
I feel that he's competent to stand trial.
The next witness was called by Judge Edward Coward. Emmanuel Tanai said Bundy suffered from a mental disorder, adding there was disagreement, however, on whether the defendant was mentally fit to stand trial in the sorority house murder case.
It does, in fact, interfere with many psychic functions, so that the person who suffers from that illness, in the opinions of, I think, knowledgeable people, does suffer from a mental illness.
Is there a specified regimen of treatment, Dr. Tanay, for this personality disorder?
If you think in terms of an effective treatment, I would say there isn't.
Judge Coward considered the testimony, then ruled Bundy competent to stand trial. He then listened to Bundy argue that the 3 public defenders should be fired, but prosecutor Dan McKeever said it would be hard to find a more competent attorney than public defender Mike Minerva, arguing Bundy should not be allowed a 4th postponement in this trial to allow new attorneys to be appointed. The judge agreed.
The public defender is competent, remains competent, and has represented this client zealously within the bounds of the law.
The defense then moved for change of venue, calling public opinion pollster Susan Hesselbark to the stand. She testified that 99% of the 362 people she polled said they knew about the case. 88% said they knew Bundy was the man arrested and charged with the crimes. But under cross-examination from prosecutor McKeever, she admitted it might be possible to find a jury.
Sir, I never said that we couldn't get a fair jury in Lynn County.
You did?
No, sir. I said it would be difficult, and I think he's going to have a hard time getting a representative jury. My goodness, you've got 120 trial registered voters. I'm sure out of that you can buy trial for 14.
But you do think that if we just stick to our guns and work hard, we might could have a jury trial here?
Yes, sir. I think it will be difficult, but I think it could be done.
The judge then decided to try to seat a jury, and so Tuesday at 9:30, the first 14 potential jurors will file into this courtroom and be questioned for possible selection as the jury in this case. 132 jurors will qualify in a separate courtroom, and Coward indicated if 14 impartial jurors couldn't be selected from that group, he'd move the trial elsewhere. Gary Melanoff, Channel 6 Eyewitness News, Tallahassee. During the past month, as a variety of important issues were raised in pre-trial hearings, very few reporters and photographers were up here on the 8th floor of the Lewis State Bank. But now, as the trial approaches, things have changed. As Ted Bundy actually goes to trial, everyone's here, from the networks to local affiliates. More than 200 outlets requested media credentials for the trial, and this area was set aside to handle the flood of newsmen and newswomen from the electronic media. In the courtroom, print journalists packed the gallery to view the proceedings, and what they saw was often serious pleading, but often quite lighthearted.
Back to a speedy trial. Heck, the last time we were in here on continuance, in bank, the court's own statement was it's going to take a national crisis, a national emergency to set this thing off again. And I hope that the record is clear that the state's going to insist that the court not withdraw from that feeling and that ruling. But all the way under the smoke aside, let me give you some law. Brooks. Yeah, that's not very as important as the way on the smoke. I've read the law.
Networks and stations will be here for the entire trial, which is expected to last at least 4 weeks. But for some, this normally vacant floor will look more like a working campground for the months of June and July. Gary Melanoff, Channel 6 Eyewitness News, on the 8th floor of the Lewis State Bank.
That's all. Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, you've got one more? Which one is that now? The lawyer's aware of that one? Mr. Cooper? Mr. Bunn?
WCA?
This is Channel 27's, right?
Yes. Sorry.
The mental competence ruling came in the morning session when two psychiatrists conceded that Bundy fully understands the seriousness of the charges against him. In the afternoon, FSU professor Dr. Susan Hesselbar took the stand to relate the findings of a survey on the effect of pretrial publicity. Dr. Hesselbar said most of those questioned associate Bundy with the Kiomega murders.
About 10% said yes, 1% said no, a little under 1% said don't know, and then you've got essentially your 88% who have already mentioned Mr. Bundy. So essentially what you've got is 97.7% who have either spontaneously brought up Mr. Bundy's name or who have said, yes, I heard it when you asked them.
In the question of whether or not Bundy should retain his attorneys, Bundy claimed his attorneys are convinced of his guilt and are pessimistic about getting him off.
Demoralized perspective. My counsel are not capable, perhaps, of presenting the defense in an aggressive and productive manner. That perhaps, and it seems to me certain, that my counsel have lost the ability to be advocates and have found themselves more in the position of being apologists.
But Judge Edward Coward said Bundy is not entitled to counsel who agree with his position on everything. The judge says he believes the public defender will vigorously and effectively defend him.
Based upon the evidence that is before me and based upon the record, based upon the argument and the law that has been argued, I'm going to deny the motion to substitute counsel, change counsel. I'm likewise going to deny the motion to withdraw. This court has indicated previously that we came here ready to proceed with trial, and we are in that posture.
Meanwhile, in another courtroom, Circuit Judge Ben Willis certified more than 300 potential jurors for the trial which is scheduled to begin today. They were told to return to court tomorrow morning. Jack Sinks, Action News.
In Florida today, Theodore Robert Bundy went on trial for murder. He is charged with killing two female students at Florida State University. But police and prosecutors say he is also a suspect in the deaths and disappearances of many other young women. Here's more from Rebecca Chase.
Ted Bundy entered the courtroom.
Is that what we've seen? Thank you, Mr. Teller.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Bundy. We're not infringing on your rights. I was just kind of
Judge, much of that was repetition, and I guess really that's the point. All of that was shown in the local community since yesterday afternoon, and that's really the whole point. I think the court can see the impact.
I understand that, and in your questioning, I want you to go fully into that.
Judge,
and on your motion for additional peremptory challenges, let the record reflect that I intend to give both sides 25 challenges. Mark your sheets accordingly. The rule provides for 10 with latitude of the court giving more. I think under the circumstances I've indicated to you previously that we're going to give you more peremptory challenges, and I will increase it by 15. We now have a total of 25.
Judge, if at a later point we see the need for additional, may we bring it up at that point?
You may bring it up.
Thank you, sir.
We ready to proceed with juror number 1, gentlemen?
Yes, sir, Judge, but for purposes of the record, before we do that, may I have permission to just put into the record the description of the courtroom?
Yes, sir.
Judge, I would like the record to reflect that there's 4 deputies on the front row. There's a deputy, 1, 2 deputies in the balcony. That there are a number of press people here sitting right behind us and across from where the jurors are going to be sitting, and in front of the bar. And again, I would renew my objection to the seating of the jurors and of the number of deputies up here in the front row.
I would like to move these 2 deputies right to the front row outside the rail. I think that's probably contested. I realize that might take 1 seat from the press, but if you'll move down just a little, I think they ought to be outside of the bar. Move right to the front row, gentlemen. That will allow you the same situation. The court has reserved the front rows for the personnel of either the public defender's or state attorney's office, and the press has previously been described.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr.
Your Honor, excuse me, I have one thing I'm not quite sure of. As indicated at the bench side, there are quite a few witnesses that have been summoned, and I'm not quite sure how the court indicated they want me to approach each.
Your
I think
approach and concern, as I understand it, was from the basis of police witnesses primarily, and if you...
Excuse me, there are a great deal of civilian witnesses too. I think we need to ask them the relationship with those people, and I'm just not sure.
Well, I can appreciate the expediency of questioning the panel in its entirety on that. You may either wait until we have something in that category, or if we laboriously have to ask either one of them, it's just part of the process, Mr. Thompson. I think to question one of them individually, we ought to question them all individually, and I've granted your motion for individual voir dire. And if it's necessary for you to ask each one of them that concept, feel free to do so. The court realized it would be more laborious and takes constructive your suggestion that probably we ought to ask them collectively, but I don't want to deprive you of asking the question, and if we need to do it individually, you may do so, or you may wait until we have a collective panel.
Thank you.
I call you first, Juror Bailey. I suggest you have them take this first seat in the front row so that one, yeah, in the front, in the jury box. If you need a little breakdown, let me know. Please feel free. I've got my mind concentrated other place. I don't want to forget you. I really would prefer not to. If you can, there's some legal reasons, all right? Yeah, I will. I sure will. If you'll take this seat, please, ma'am, the first one there, seat number 1. As I indicated to you previously, counsel will be questioning you from voir dire examination. The proceedings are necessarily taken down verbatim by the court reporter. If you would elevate your voice just a little bit for that reason, it would be appreciated by the court. All right, Mr. McKeever, Mr. Simpson, you may proceed.
Thank you, Doctor. Good morning. Is it Mrs. Johnson?
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Johnson, I'm Larry Simpson, and I'm an assistant state attorney. I'm the prosecutor in this case, and I represent the people of the state of Florida. Here in the courtroom today, as I'm sure you saw in the interview you first brought in, we have, of course, the judge, bailiff, court reporter, and everybody else is here. Do you know any of the personnel that are involved in this case?
I know the deputy clerk, Ms. Sauls,
Okay.
and the court reporter's face looks familiar. I don't know the name.
You don't know the judge?
No, sir.
Any of the prosecuting assistants, Mr. McKeever or Ms. Kent?
Kent, I think I know Ms. Kent.
How would you know her?
I think she's a client of my boss.
And who is your boss?
Robert Clarkson.
He's an attorney here in town. How about any of the personnel that are seated with Mr. Bundy from the public defender's office? Do you know anyone there?
No, sir, I don't think so.
How about Mr. Bundy? Do you know him or have you ever met him before?
No, sir.
What kind of law does your boss practice?
Corporation and business law, real property, will, probate.
Has he had any connection at all with criminal law?
No, sir, no.
Do you know anything about criminal law in your capacity as a secretary?
No, sir, I think the work.
What have you done other than be a legal secretary? Have you had any other jobs?
Not in the last 6 years.
What kind of training or experience do you have in that particular?
On the job training.
Did you have to go through some kind of a legal secretary school?
No, sir, I didn't.
How long have you lived here in Tallahassee?
6 years.
And where did you live before?
Thomasville, Georgia.
And did you live in Thomasville pretty much all your life?
Yes, sir, around there.
Did you go to high school in Thomasville?
In
Pelham, Georgia? Okay. And do you have any education past high school?
College credits from ABAC and TIFT, but nothing major.
How about your husband? You are married, huh?
Right.
So, and what does he do?
He's assistant manager at Lowe's in Tallahassee.
And how long has he worked there?
About 4 years.
And what kind of occupation or job did he have before going to Lowe's?
I believe that he worked with JCPenney's in North Carolina.
Was that also in a management type position?
Sales, I believe.
And how long have you been married?
7 months.
Do you have any children? I would assume you do.
Yes, sir, I do.
Do you? And how many children do you have?
Just one.
And how old is
10.
child? 10? Is it a boy or a girl?
A boy.
Does he go to school here in Tallahassee?
Yes, sir, he does.
What school is it?
Astoria Park.
Do you live in the Astoria Park area?
Yes.
Whereabouts in that area?
Hartsfield Circle subdivision, Landwell Drive.
Do you subscribe to the Tallahassee Democrat?
Yes, sir.
And you just subscribe to any other newspaper?
No, sir.
Do you read the Democrat?
Yes, sir.
Fairly often?
Every morning.
You used to read it in the afternoon, but now you read it in the morning?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How about the local television stations? How many of those do you get?
I get all with both of them. We have cable.
Do you watch them regularly?
Can you hear, Madam Reporter?
Not regularly, no, sir. I'm frequently not home by 6 and don't stay up till 11.
So you wouldn't watch the news as a general rule every night? Mrs. Johnson, we anticipate that once this trial begins, that it's going to last anywhere from 3 weeks to perhaps 4 weeks, or maybe even a little bit longer than that. And during that period of time, the jurors that are selected to hear this case will be required to be sequestered, that is, put aside and not be allowed to go back to their families or homes or whatever. If you were selected as a juror in this case, would that cause you a particular hardship?
It depends on if you ask me or my boss. Yes, sir, I think it would. I really would.
And how bad a hardship are we talking about? What would be your particular problem?
I work for an attorney and I'm the only secretary in the case.
How about with your home situation?
No, sir. Wouldn't be any problem.
During the trial itself, of course, you will not be able to talk with your boss or with your husband or anyone else like that. Is there anything in particular that's coming up within the next 3 to 4 weeks that might be a problem in that regard?
Yes, sir. I'm supposed to leave on vacation Thursday for 3 days.
Okay. Assuming you didn't have a vacation, is there anything else that could cause you a problem?
No, sir. No.
Now, you heard the judge whenever he told you what the charges were that were involved in this case, did you not? And you understand that 2 of the charges that are involved are charges of first-degree murder.
Yes,
sir. Those, of course, are very serious charges. Does the fact that they are serious charges, does that cause you a particular concern, so much so that you could not listen to the evidence that's going to be presented in this case?
no, sir.
The judge will also tell you as we go through the trial that the burden of proof in this case is upon the state to prove the defendant's guilt in this case. And you understand that.
Yes.
Don't you?
Yes.
Okay. The judge will tell you that that burden is to prove the defendant's guilt beyond every reasonable doubt. If I'm able to do that in this case, if I am able to present the evidence to you as a juror in this case that would prove to you that the defendant in this case is guilty, would you be able to return a verdict of guilty in this case?
Yes.
By the same token, if I can't do that, I'll expect you to return a verdict of not guilty, and I assume you'll do that like I do.
Yes.
Okay. Now, through the course of the proceedings, of course, many witnesses will be called, arguments will be had, and things of that nature. Do you think that you could base your verdict in this case solely on the evidence that is presented here in this courtroom?
Yes.
Now, of course, I assume that since you have read, you do read the newspaper, the Tallahassee Democrat, and I assume you might even read a couple of other newspapers from time to time. The mere fact that you may have read something about this case in the newspaper, is that going to influence your judgment in this case?
No, sir, I don't think so.
You would be willing to put aside anything that you had seen or heard about this case and base your verdict on the evidence that's presented?
Yes.
The fact that this is a first-degree murder case means that it's also a capital case. Do you understand what that means?
I think I do.
That means simply that there is a possibility that the death penalty may be imposed in this case. Okay? Now, is there anything at all about that, merely the fact that there's a possibility of the death penalty being imposed, that causes you in particular concern?
No, sir.
I know you're not a lawyer, but let me just explain to you briefly that the procedure that we will use in this case is that we will have a trial that will determine the question of guilt or innocence first. When a verdict of guilty is returned, then we move into what is called a second phase of the trial, which is a recommendation phase. So the jury is given an opportunity to recommend to the judge what sentence should be imposed, whether it be death or life in prison. And the jury would merely make a recommendation to the judge that the judge could follow or not follow as he deemed. Do you think that that would cause you a problem in this case in the sense that you would be required to return a recommendation one way or the other?
No, sir.
You could do that, could you not, based upon the evidence that's presented during that phase of the case also?
I believe I do.
Your Honor, I have no further questions on the jury.
Ms. Johnson, my name is Lynn Thompson. I'm an attorney and I represent Ted Bundy. He is seated at the student counsel table there beside him is Ms. Martha Good, who's also an attorney, and she will be working with me in the presentation of this case. I'm going to ask you questions and talk with you in general about a lot of matters involving this case. And some of these things may appear to be quite personal, but like the judge indicated, I'm not trying to embarrass you. I want you to understand that to start off with. It's necessary that I ask you these questions. Some of the questions may seem a little strange to you, probably strange to me, but experts have told me it's the kind of things I need to ask you. So I will do the best I can. If you have any problems, let me know, and we'll try to go from there. I think you went pretty much over where you had lived prior to coming to Tallahassee. You lived here 6 years.
Yes, sir.
Prior to coming here today, have you ever had any experience with a jury, grand jury, or criminal jury experience at all?
The only experience that I've had is Mr. Parker had a one-week civil jury trial before Judge Wills about a year and a half ago. But other than that, no experience with any jury trial.
So what was your participation in that?
I was simply his secretary. He would pass me notes if he needed me to get something or to call a witness to be there at a certain time, or as a spectator.
But you've never been a juror?
No, no, sir.
Okay. Are you involved in any social organizations, church clubs, things of this nature?
Only the local legal secretarial organization.
And what does that entail?
We meet monthly and have educational speakers, social hours.
You have no particular church affiliations?
I'm Baptist, but we attend the Methodist Church here in Tallahassee.
Attend pretty regular?
A couple of times a month.
You indicated that would that mean the whole family?
Will you talk up just a little bit, please, both of you?
Yes, sir. You indicated would that be your husband and your child also?
Right.
You, of course, were living here in January of 78, is that correct?
Yes.
Have you, or yourself or your husband, have any connections with the Florida State University student, perhaps attending social events there or football games?
Only football games.
Okay. Is that pretty regular also?
Yes.
Have yourself or your husband had any military experience?
No, sir.
Neither of you had any
No, sir.
service? Close family members who were military, perhaps?
My stepfather,
What was that?
career Army. He just recently got out about 2 years ago.
So, being stepfather, were you at home? when
No,
he
sir, I was
served?
not close to him at all. Never lived with him and my mother.
Do you have any political affiliations?
No, sir.
You're active in campaigns? Your boss doing attorney type?
No, sir, he tries to stay out of that time.
What's your husband? Is he?
No, sir.
Outside interests, hobbies, this kind of thing, do you participate?
Not a lot away from home. Our leisure time is mostly spent working in the yard and just following the house. So that's about what takes up.
You take care of
Yes.
getting the house together, the lawns and all that?
Right.
Do you subscribe or regularly read any magazines, national, local magazines, other newspapers?
Yes, sir, quite a few. My husband and I both like to read. That's probably my vice.
What type of magazine?
Anything from Good Housekeeping, Reader's Digest, Cosmopolitan, anything probably that's on the newsstand, I would pick it up.
Mostly you get from the newsstand rather than subscription.
Half and half.
How much reading? What's he enjoying?
A lot of wildlife magazines, mainly.
Is he a sportsman then, outdoor?
Camping, fishing, that kind
Not much hunting?
of. No, sir.
You're presently employed as a private attorney. Have you ever had any appointment with city, state, federal government, secretarial capacity?
No, sir.
How about your husband?
Not as long as we've been married or that I've known.
Mr. Simpson asked you whether or not you had known any of the participants. Now that I've introduced Ms. Good, those names familiar to you?
No, sir, not at all.
This case involves rather violent type crimes. And again, I don't want to seem like I'm crying if you like, but have you ever had any personal experience as a victim of a crime against you, yourself, your family, close friend?
No, sir.
Have you ever been called as a witness in a case?
No, sir.
You ever made a complaint against someone that ended up in a prosecution or anything being started?
No, sir.
The idea of crime itself in Tallahassee, how do you see that as a problem? Is it severe? Do you feelings personally about crime here?
No, sir, I really don't. I didn't think that Tallahassee was any worse than anywhere else, and probably a lot better.
Enjoy living.
I
Do you have any personal fears or feelings if you should go out alone at night
none at all.
in your neighborhood?
No, sir.
Dealing with your idea of government, and good government, and that sort of thing, how do you feel in general about laws being strictly enforced?
I believe they should be.
Would you elaborate on that a little bit? Maybe what I'm getting at is there any like circumstances where maybe there are exceptions to the rule that you can recognize, or just because it's a law must be followed to the letter?
There are probably always exceptions to every rule, and I'm sure you can find them when you need them. But I believe that if there's a law, it should be enforced, period.
How do you see law and order as a goal for the government? Is that a high priority item in your mind?
No, sir, it's not.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I'm not sure that I can. I'm not sure what you're looking for. It's not something I sit and think about a lot, what government should be doing.
I realize you probably dwell on that a lot. What I'm getting at is, do you see, say, a lack of law and order as a problem, perhaps, or are you pretty happy with the way?
On the whole, I'm fairly happy with it. Yes, sir. I don't think there's a lack of law and order.
Do you feel that police agencies, whether sheriff's department or whatever, should, how do you feel about the use of force in a arrest type situation or enforcement?
I don't believe in it unless it's absolutely necessary. I'm not a forceful person. To me, I've got to be other ways to do things than by force.
So what exactly do you by absolutely necessary?
I'm not sure. If there is no other way to subdue a person than by force, then that's necessary.
But force is being used against an officer, he has a right to use force by it.
Yes, sir.
How about a situation where there's no force involved? That's resistant arrest.
In other words, if a person is not resisting arrest, then if he's coming along peaceably, you shouldn't have to use force.
Mr. Simpson indicated this case could take quite a while. Could be fairly lengthy matter. At some point, should you be on the jury, you may have to force opinions as to what you consider the evidence to be. How are you generally in offering opinions? Are you kind of a person that likes to express your opinion? Are you more quiet?
I'm not quiet.
The jury, you talk.
Yes, sir.
How about a situation now where there may be an imbalance on the jury? There may be a lot of men, there may be one or a small number of women on there. Are you the type of person that, given that kind of a setting, would stick with your opinion you felt was justified?
I felt that I was justified. I was still willing to listen to others.
discuss the matter, is what you're
Right,
saying.
yes.
Primarily. Your opinion can be weighed and you listen to the opinions of other people. Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
exactly.
As you've noticed, there are quite a few people in this room today.
Yes.
And there are cameras up here, various sorts, and radio transmission, and deputies, and sorted press people. That said, does that cause you to have probably feel nervous about it? Pretty comfortable?
I'm fairly comfortable now.
Can't think you might not have been so much.
No, sir, I wasn't.
But it's something you can't get over. And,
Yes, sir.
so if you were on the jury and the same type of atmosphere existed, would that bother you?
No, sir.
No feeling? That ties into another situation. You at one point received a subpoena to appear in this case. How did you receive that?
In truth, I was excited.
You're excited?
I've never been subpoenaed for jury duty, and I've always wanted to be called.
Did you know what case you were going to be involved in?
No, sir.
When did you find that out?
My boss found out first, and he told me.
You had some discussion with him about it?
Yes.
How did that go?
Well, he was upset at the thought that I might be chosen because I am the only secretary of the House. And we just discussed it.
You talked about the fact that it could take a while.
Yes, we did.
That's a reasonable likelihood then. Your neighbors, did you talk with them about it at all?
No, sir.
No discussion?
No.
Husband like the idea?
Not a lot.
How was that?
We've mostly joked about it. I don't think it was that seriously.
He's fully aware of the case and the subject matter and the possibility of agreeing with the law.
Right.
Judge sort of outlined what the case is about. In all respects, it's a horrible event. So I don't think there's any way that we can avoid that realization. I think it's very natural for a person on a jury to be affected or have passion, both the victims of the crime, families of victims. Very emotional situation what we're going to have here. And should you be up here, you're going to be involved in that emotion. And you need to ask how it's going to make you feel.
I am a compassionate person, but I'm also a practical person. And I realize what will be going on.
And being practical, how do you mean?
I try not to exaggerate things, blow them out of proportion. I try and look on the practical side of things and be realistic.
And part of the realism is going to involve some vivid descriptions of injured people. It could involve very explicit pictures, photographs. It could involve items of physical evidence that may be damaged, bloody, a lot of things like that that's more likely to go to see. How do you see that? As practical, again, it's going to happen.
I've never been exposed to it. I don't know how I would react. I don't think I'd faint. I don't think I'd cry. I think I would look objective.
The objectivity is what we're talking about, I guess, really. Because besides all the pictures, there's going to be a lot of other evidence that you're going to look at, too. people talking from the stand, and you're going to have to, as part of your duty, evaluate that. Now, looking at both of those together, how do you feel about that?
There again, I don't know. I don't expose the people.
It's a novel experience.
Yes, sir, you're right.
Do you think it's a possibility that the force of the pictures could prevent you from looking objectively at the other evidence?
No, sir, I don't.
And that same idea is going to be important a couple more times. Once you assess the evidence, you're going to have to come up with a verdict at some point, should you be on through. How do you feel after seeing all that evidence, whatever comes out? I'm not really sure right now what it may be, but does that make you apprehensive somewhat?
No, sir.
Mr. Simpson also indicated that there's two parts to this case. There's a part involving finding guilt or innocence, should there be a finding of guilt. Then there's a separate, completely different function on sentencing. And when you consider the sentencing part,